Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through the critical source material and really pull out the essential nuggets you need to be well-informed.
Hey there.
Today, we are analyzing a monumental failure, one that literally ground a nation's air travel to a complete standstill.
Yeah, we're talking about the catastrophic operational implosion of IndiGo Airlines in December 2025.
And for our listeners, especially those outside of India, you really have to understand the scale here.
Right. This wasn't some minor carrier struggling. This was India's dominant domestic airline. I mean, they were commanding a colossal 60 to 65% of the entire air travel market.
So when they failed, the whole system failed.
The whole system. On December 4th, their worst day, they logged 550 cancellations. And their famed on-time performance, their OTP, which usually hovered around, 90%, it plummeted to just 8.5%.
That number, 8.5%, is just staggering. It means, what, 9 out of every 10 flights were late or canceled?
Pretty much.
But the real mission of this deep dive is to understand the paradox here. This collapse wasn't triggered by a single crash or some sudden financial crisis.
No, it was a systemic failure, one born from this deep conflict between, on the one hand, ruthless efficiency.
And on the other, zero resilience.
Exactly. So today we're here to unpack the three simultaneous shocks that hit them. There was a technical engine failure, a regulatory squeeze, and just plain seasonal chaos.
And ultimately, we want to analyze the core lesson for all of us. When one company dominates a critical national sector, its failure stops being just a business problem.
It instantly becomes a national crisis. And that demands a whole new way of thinking, a new regulatory model we're calling the Systemically Important Operator, or SIO, framework.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To really get how IndiGo got to this point of collapse, we have to look very quickly at the history of modern aviation.
Yeah, and it really boils down to three big philosophical shifts. Phase one, right after World War II, was all about regulation. Aviation was treated like a public utility. The Chicago Convention set global standards where safety was completely non-negotiable. Schedules had huge buffers built in, and competition was limited.
So it was expensive, but it was robust. You could count on it.
You could count on it. Then comes phase two, starting around 1978 with the U.S. Airline Deregulation Act.
And that's the critical turning point, isn't it?
It's everything. The focus swung from utility to market competition. So fares dropped, frequency went way up, and efficiency became king.
But we immediately saw the trade-off.
Oh yeah, iconic carriers like Pan Am and TWA went bankrupt. And we started seeing these systemic issues around, labor fatigue and flexibility. The market proved it could deliver cheap tickets, but it introduced a lot of fragility.
Which perfectly sets the stage for phase three, the rise of the specialized low-cost carrier, which IndiGo just perfected in India, starting around 2007.
They were masterful at optimization, truly. Their success was built on standardization. They operated almost exclusively on one aircraft type, the Airbus A320.
Which streamlines everything, maintenance, training, all of it.
Right. They targeted these lightning-fast turnaround times, just 25 to 30 minutes. And critically, they kept their labor costs 30 to 40% lower than competitors.
And that's how they could push each plane to fly 6, even 8 times a day. It's how they ate up 60 to 65% of the market by 2025.
But here's the vulnerability baked right into that success.
Yep.
Zero operational buffers.
None.
They ran their systems at 100% capacity, no spare crew pool, no spare aircraft on standby, no slack in those schedules. They optimized for efficiency, which is great when things are smooth.
But it created a system that was terrifyingly vulnerable when multiple shocks hit at the same time.
And that is exactly how we ended up at December 4th, 2025.
Right. To really visualize this cascade of failure, let's go to that analogy from the source material, the one about Ria the schoolgirl.
It's a great analogy. Ria misses her big exam not because of one problem, but because 3 or 4 small problems all stack up at once.
A single flat tire is manageable.
Of course. But a flat tire plus you overslept, plus there's a flood, plus your backup ride is unavailable, that's a catastrophe. IndiGo faced 3 of these massive shocks at once.
So, shock 1. The technical failure. The flat tire.
This was all about the engines on their massive Airbus A320 NEO fleet. The Pratt & Whitney engines. The issue wasn't the whole engine, but one specific part. The high-pressure turbine blades.
Okay.
They were failing way too early. Instead of lasting the design 10,000 cycles, they were failing at like 3,000 to 5,000.
So a part that should have lasted years was lasting just months. And the regulators would have mandated grounding those planes.
Precisely. This instantly grounded somewhere between 40 and 45 of their aircraft. They were now AOG aircraft on ground, and this technical fault exposed a global weakness. a massive bottleneck in maintenance and repair.
Ah, I see.
Repairs that should have taken 30 days were now taking 90 to 120 days because of a worldwide shortage of spare engines. So, boom, 40 aircraft just erased from their schedule.
40 planes gone. And while they're scrambling with that, the regulator piles on with shock 2, the regulatory squeeze.
This was the DGCA, India's regulator. They introduced new safety rules, flight duty time limitations, or FDTL to combat pilot fatigue. They reduced night landings, which is all about protecting pilots and passengers. Safety first.
Okay, wait, but if the DGCA's rules were correct for safety, why did the analysts blame them for 40% of this? Didn't IndiGo just choose to ignore the rule change?
That's the crucial point. IndiGo knew these rules were coming for months, but instead of preparing, they spent their time lobbying the DGCA to delay them or get an exemption.
Instead of hiring more crew.
Exactly. They needed to proactively hire an estimated 150 buffer pilots to maintain their schedule under the new rules. They chose lobbying over hiring.
And that decision, to rely on a broken legacy rostering system instead of updating it, that seems like operational negligence when you know a huge rule is coming.
It was a catastrophic bet. Their system wasn't updated, so it led to immediate manual scheduling chaos.
Yeah.
And the warning signs were everywhere. They had 755 FDTL-related cancellations in November 2024 alone.
A full month before the meltdown.
A full month. And management just ignored it, betting the government would blink first.
So they're short 45 planes, their crew scheduling is a total mess, and then shock 3 hits.
This was the predictable part, the convergence of weather and demand. December in India means severe seasonal fog over Delhi, the nation's busiest hub.
Right.
That fog cut air traffic control capacity by 40%. It forced airlines to hold flights at their origin airports, injecting huge network-wide delays into a system with zero slack.
And it coincided with peak wedding season.
Exactly. So demand was at its absolute max, and the human stakes of every single cancellation were at their highest. A regular delay is an inconvenience. A delay during wedding season is life-altering chaos.
Which brings us to December 4th, the day it all just fell apart.
The human component broke first. Crew absenteeism spiked. Normally, it's about 4 or 5%. It shot up to 16 to 18%.
Wow, so almost 1 in 5 crew members just not showing up. That sounds like a symptom of a deeply broken, overstressed system.
Absolutely. The Operations Control Center was just overwhelmed. Manual crew assignments, which should be rare, were taking 45 minutes per flight.
And because of their model, flying each plane 6 to 8 times a day, one delay in Mumbai,
meant that plane's entire schedule for the next 2 days collapsed. It caused cancellations hundreds of miles away in Bangalore or Chennai, a complete domino effect.
And what's crucial for you to understand here is the spillover. IndiGo's failure didn't just stay with IndiGo.
No, their grounded planes were blocking valuable parking bays at other critical airports, like Pune. It forced other airlines, Air India, SpiceJet, to take 90-minute delays because they literally couldn't park their planes.
One airline's efficiency failure became the entire country's problem.
And this is where we have to talk about the human cost. It's one thing to talk about OTP, but the stories. They really put a face on this. The source material mentions Priya, a bride who missed her own wedding ceremony.
Her flight canceled just hours before. The total disruption cost for her family was estimated at around 18 to 22 lakh rupees.
And for our global listeners, that's roughly 22,000 to 26,000 US dollars in cancellation fees, lost payments, just total chaos.
Then there's the case of Ananya, the mother stranded for 12 hours with her 8-month-old baby who had a fever. She couldn't get help, couldn't find another flight.
Because the few remaining tickets on other airlines had surged to 3 times the price, over 18,000 rupees for a short domestic flight. Just unsustainable for most families.
That is the real cost of zero resilience. So then the question becomes, what did this actually cost IndiGo? The company's own CFO calculated that the reactive crisis cost,
once the chaos had started, was in the range of 600 to 700 crore rupees.
hundreds of millions of US dollars.
Now compare that to what it would have cost to prevent it. Hiring those 150 buffer pilots, updating their software, that would have cost about 90 to 120 crore.
So the reactive cost was 5 to 6 times higher than the proactive investment. That shows a catastrophic failure in risk modeling. They bet small and paid huge.
They absolutely did. They prioritized a marginal quarterly profit over the structural integrity of the entire operation.
So, of course, the government had to step in.
Right. The DGCA quickly granted a temporary FDTL exemption until early 2026, which was basically an admission that their timing was unsustainable.
And the Railway Ministry had to deploy 116 emergency train coaches just to handle all the stranded passengers.
Which brings us back to that systemic lesson and the shared blame. 60% IndiGo, 40% DGCA.
The regulator safety goal was right, but the rigid implementation just failed to account for the risk in a market where one player has 65% capacity.
Exactly. Granting the exemption after the collapse proved the timing was disastrous, and IndiGo's failure was choosing lobbying over hiring.
So since the market couldn't correct itself, there were no alternatives for passengers. Regulation has to step in.
And that is the whole argument for the SIO framework, the systemically important operator model. It's a concept drawn directly from the 2008 banking crisis.
Where the too big to fail banks, the sci-fis, were made to hold mandatory capital buffers.
Precisely. So what does an SIO designation mean for an airline that controls more than half the country's flights, like IndiGo?
It means mandatory resilience.
Mandatory resilience. SIOs shouldn't be allowed to operate at zero buffer. They should be required to maintain, say, a 15% crew buffer capacity and a 5% spare aircraft standby fleet.
And they have to conduct stress tests.
Critically, quarterly stress testing against combined shocks engine failure plus bad weather plus a regulatory change. They have to prove, on paper, that they can survive the perfect storm.
The lesson, then, is that the future standard can't be based purely on the efficiency metrics of the deregulation era.
No, it has to be a conscious trade-off. The sustainable standard must enforce a balance. Something like 85% efficiency plus 10% resilience plus 5% safety. IndiGo pushed for 95% efficiency, they sacrificed that 10% cushion, and they nearly collapsed the entire national infrastructure.
Stability costs margin, but it saves your existence.
It saves your existence.
This IndiGo crisis was completely preventable. It was a failure of risk modeling, where the cost of buffers, the staff, the spare planes, was deemed an unnecessary expense, right up until the staggering 600 to 700 crore rupee crisis proved otherwise.
And here's the relevance for you, no matter what field you're in. Think about this failure of concentration and resilience in your own industry. Where's the fragility?
In telecom, logistics, banking, e-commerce. If a single player controls 60% or more of that critical capacity, their failure isn't just a business headline.
It is a systemic risk that affects your daily life.
The challenge now is to break that historical cycle that aviation and so many other industries seems locked into. Regulation, then deregulation, then crisis, and then finally re-regulation.
We learn the hard way. Systems don't collapse when they're built with a little bit of slack. They fail when they are ruthlessly over-optimized without any buffer capacity. We have the SIO framework now to enforce that balance. The question for governments and dominant businesses across the world is whether they'll internalize this lesson before the next shock inevitably hits.